Okay, so let's get started here. So my name is Jason Alba, and I have traveled the U.S. and then I went to Turkey once speaking. So I'm an international speaker because I went to Turkey. Actually, I've spoken since in Belgium, and I think that's it. So I guess I'm legit international speaker because I've spoken in the US and two other countries. But I've traveled the country and I've spoken mostly to job clubs. That's really my sweet spot. Is I'll go talk to professionals who are in any stage of employment or unemployment, and it's been a lot of fun. I love talking to people and learning about their careers, even though this is in a hardship time for them. It started because I created a website called jibberjobber.com, which is like a CRM for job seekers. And that was cool. Like I thought it was cool, and some people thought it was really cool. And then this was back in 2008. I wrote a book on LinkedIn, and it really was a terrible book. But we'll talk about books in a little bit. But anyways, I wrote this book on LinkedIn, and everybody thought that was cool, which was funny because the book sucked so bad. It was in its fourth edition, and I was re-editing it, and I thought, man, this even the fourth edition stinks. Like it was really a hard thing to put my name on and put out there, but it did wonders for my career, and it did wonders for people who wanted to learn about personal branding and stuff like that. So the funny thing is, the title of the book was so good. It was an excellent title. And what I learned was that your book doesn't have to be excellent. I don't really want to go into the whole philosophy and debate of talking about people who write crap. Like I'm not promoting that you write bad stuff. But as far as a personal branding tool, I really didn't have to worry about the book being poor as much as I needed to focus on having an excellent title. Because when people introduced me on stage, they never said, hey, here's Jason Alba, and his book, has, here's all the reviews on Amazon or whatever. There was somebody that wrote this really nasty review on Amazon, and I was like, man, you're a jerk. Like, what a horrible person to spend your time doing that. And anyways, this was the first edition of the book, and when I went through to edit it the second time for the second edition, I was reading through the first edition. I thought, this really is terrible. I should go to Amazon and leave my own 1-star review. It's such a poorly written book. So anyways, writing my book was a big part of my personal branding journey, and it helped me understand the power of having a personal brand, something that I never really thought about or heard about before. And so, anyways, so that's part of the journey, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. I am actually pretty nervous. I get on stage frequently, and I've done my Pluralsight courses. Which is very, the stage experience is you can see people, you can read their feedback, you can understand if a joke that you say like lands flat, and you can kind of adjust where you're going. And then people have questions, and so there's like this energy in the room. And then the Pluralsight experience is, you're talking into a microphone at a screen with a PowerPoint on it, and it's very solitary, and you get zero feedback in the moment. And so there's that extreme. This is the first time that I am doing anything live. I actually bought a nice camera, which I'm not using right now, but I bought a nice camera last year to do more video stuff. But this is it. So this is my first entry. So I'm going to relate a story that ties right into that. And then I want to talk about how that ties into your personal brand. So a few years ago, I lived in a different house, and I was finishing my basement, which I'm not really handy, but I'm up for trying and figuring out and learning and stuff like that. I'm curious enough to try and figure stuff out. So we got everything done up to the sheetrock and the texturing, and it was ready to paint. And of all the stuff that I have always hated to do, painting was at the top of the list. I don't know why. I mean, it's actually really satisfying to see fresh paint and to see it change, like see a room change so drastically because you put paint up. But I just dislike the cleanup. I hate the cleanup. The preparation is just kind of yucky and stuff. And so, anyways, so I found myself on the day that I had scheduled to paint my basement, and this is pretty much by myself. I had little kids at the time, and they all wanted to help. And if any of you have ever had little kids help you paint in your house, you know that it's better to lock them away and just get the job done and have it more clean than have them come in. And so, anyways, I got everything out. I got the paintbrushes and the rollers and the rags, and I got the paint and I stirred it, and I got the like everything ready. And then and then I kind of moved stuff around a little bit, and then I moved a little bit more around, and like I don't know how long this took, but it was probably like 1 or 2 hours that I was prepping to paint. And for some reason, I was just afraid to actually start painting, because once you start painting, the preparation time is over, right? And so what I did was I was doing this, and then finally I was like, I gotta just do this. I need to get the roller wet and put it on the wall. And as soon as I did that, everything else just flowed, right? And so I spent hours probably thinking and rethinking, analysis paralysis, right? And but once I actually got that first roll on, then my brain switched over, and I'm like, all right, let's do this. Let's finish this job. And I think sometimes when we talk about careers, personal branding, networking, stuff like that, we look at that and we're like, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do that, and I'm going to, and you never do anything because you don't want to do anything until you're ready, right? And that's kind of how I've been with YouTube Live and live videos and stuff like that. Like I've never really been ready, but this morning, actually last night, I was like, I don't know if I should do this. And then I tweeted it, and I was like, all right, committed, I'm going to do it. And that's really kind of where I think a lot of people are with their personal brand. Like they know they should do something. They have some ideas on what they should do. But they're not quite sure when to start or where to start or how to start. And so hopefully by the end of however long we spend today, you'll have a really good idea of some things that you can do right now to make a difference. So have an agenda put together. And what we'll do first is jump into a little bit of housekeeping just real quick, and then we'll go into a lot of the content or the meat, the general personal branding information. Just real quick, Sean asked on YouTube Live, do you practice speaking techniques before going into making courses? By the time I start recording a course, I have probably edited my script 5 or 6 times. I used to not script, and I've looked at my old courses, and I'm like, I really should have scripted those, but I script everything now. And I've gone through it 5 or 6 times in an editing mode. And then I read it out loud at least twice, which is also part of editing, and I clean it up. And then I do, voice stuff and just do that. But I wouldn't say that there's any, I have my own little things, but I'm not sure if they're like trained things. So, all right. So housekeeping, what we're going to do, starting today, it's April Fool's Day, and I should say April 1st, at least in the US it is. What we're going to do for the rest of the month, except for Saturdays and Sundays, I'm not going to commit to you guys on Saturdays and Sundays, but Monday through Friday until the end of the month, I will spend time on a YouTube Live going over a specific topic based on a course that I've done on Pluralsight. So I have right now like 34 live courses on Pluralsight. And if you don't have access to Pluralsight, just shoot me a message. I'm Jason at jibberjobber.com, and I can get you probably access unless I run out. And so it's no cost. So you can watch my course, and then basically we're going to kind of review and kind of talk about stuff, maybe kind of book review or whatever. Also on my blog, I will have the schedule of what we're going to do for the rest of the month. And so that will be on jibberjabber.com/blog. And I'll post it today, probably today, maybe tomorrow. Tomorrow, just so you know, if you want to prepare for tomorrow, we're going to talk about informational interviews, which might sound a little bit boring, but this is actually the most powerful networking strategy or technique that I've ever come across. And for job seekers, it's a must. I tell job seekers that if I were to start a job search today, I'd spend 90 or 95% of my time on informational interviews. I call it networking on steroids. It is really, really cool stuff. And I actually just spent a month and a half redoing my course, just I think in January or February. So that course is updated, and I think it's good. And it's not that long. All right. If you have any questions, again, you can put them in the live chat, or you can go over on Twitter. I got another window open on Twitter, and I'm watching there in the notifications. And also, one last thing, I'm not going to be rambling the whole month. So once I get some new technology figured out, I'm going to bring in some guests, and I'm excited to bring in hopefully some recruiters, hopefully some other soft skill authors from Pluralsight. And we'll just kind of get into the nuts and bolts of stuff. So, all right, let's talk about personal branding. So first of all, my course on Pluralsight, if you just Google, you can search personal brand or brand in Pluralsight. But if you go to Google or whatever search engine you like, you can type in Pluralsight and then personal brand, and that'll come up with my course up at or towards the top. It's 2 hours. And it's one of my older courses. I can tell I've been watching it this morning. It needs to be redone, but bear with the oldness. There's still a lot of good content in there. The whole idea of personal branding, okay? I was actually, in 2006, I was in job search mode and I was in entrepreneur mode at the same time. And I didn't really understand brand. I didn't understand. I mean, I talked about it. I have a business degree and an MBA, and we talked about branding all the time, but I didn't understand the power of developing a corporate or a personal brand until I actually really needed one. And the lame part of that is I didn't really have the brand that I wanted when I needed it. And so I've become a huge proponent of you proactively developing your personal brand. And so the way that I love describing that is that when you have a brand, right? When people know you, or they know your proficiencies, or they know something about you and there's something good, and they know of opportunities that would be a good match for you, they can make those connections between you and what you offer and what the opportunities are, right? And so it has a lot to do with who knows you, right? They used to say networking is who you know. I turn that upside down, say it's really more about who knows you. And that's part A. Part B is what they know about you. Okay, those are the two critical parts of what we want to do. We want to increase the number of people that know us, and we want to somehow shape what they know about us, right? And how they perceive us. And so let me just qualify that really quickly. When I talk about networking in general, a lot of people are like, they get hung up on numbers. I don't want to have a huge network on LinkedIn, or I don't need to worry about numbers and quantity. And on LinkedIn, there's been this quantity versus quality debate for a long time. Well, the real thing that I want to impress upon you when it comes to networking is I think numbers are important. I think it's good to have, more people rather than less people know about you or whatever. But I really want you to focus on not the quality of people who know you, but the types of people who know you, right? So I'm talking about people, if you're a developer, I'm talking about other developers or people who hire developers, right? And so I'm not really concerned about the kid working at Taco Bell, that I might go to Taco Bell every day and see this, this kid even knows what I'm going to order before I even walk in the door. I mean, that's a quantity thing, but he might not have any contacts that can help me in my objectives, right? And so when I talk about the type of people, I call this your space. And these are the people that are in your industry, your profession, think kind of job title, right? And industry, I've been in IT most of my career. So industry, I'm not stuck in one industry. I can go to multiple industries. So whatever industries you want to focus on. And then the third one is your geographic location, independent of profession and industry. So anyways, I want people in my space to know me and to think about me, because when that happens, I don't have to go out all the time and say, hey, my name is Jason Alba, and here's my 30-second pitch, and hopefully anybody cares about that, and you'll introduce me. That's what I would call push marketing, where I have to proactively go out and communicate what my brand is and hope that I get some value out of that. The alternative to push branding is pull branding, right? When you have a brand that you've developed and people know who you are and why they should even care about you and why they want you on their team or on their projects, or they want you as a contractor because your brand is so powerful, right? Then they come to you. And when they hear about opportunities behind closed doors, right, then they're like, oh, you know what? I know this guy, Jason Alba. He is the guy that you want to talk to. That's the power of pull branding. I actually have not been in a job search for a long time, but last year, about a year ago, I got approached by one of the only companies that would pull me out of being an entrepreneur. Not completely, but a company that I'd be interested in working at. And the recruiter called me up and said, hey, this senior level executive said that we need to talk to you about this role because he said you would be perfect for this role. That's the power of a personal brand. And it's so cool. It's fun. It's way more fun than what I experienced in 2006 when I had to do a lot of push marketing and I got nowhere with that. So that's the vision that I really want you to have, whether you're coming at this, for your own career or with your own business or, repping your company or whatever. I want you to think about how a brand can create a pull where people are coming to you because of what you've created, the perception you've created, as opposed to you always having to go up and reintroduce yourself or your stuff. All right. So, just look at my notes here real quick and see what I've already talked about and what I want to skip. All right. So when I get on stage with job seekers, when I start talking about personal branding, I'll say, all right, by raise of hands, who in here has a personal brand? And there are, I don't know, maybe like 5 people out of 100 that raise their hand. And the rest, of course, you have your introverts and your shy people who don't want me to pick on them. But a lot of people are like, well, I mean, I've never done anything for a brand, so I don't think I have a brand. And so I go through this kind of spiel in this series of slides, and this is in the personal branding course on Pluralsight, where I basically say, look, everybody has a brand. Everybody has a brand. Your brand is either intentional because you've thought about how you want to be branded and you've put together things like maybe a bio on LinkedIn, or something in your email signature, or you've done something intentional, right? There's a guy in Minneapolis, and his tagline, before I ever met him, of course, he's a marketing guy, and so he gets branding. His tagline was that he markets stuff to men. I think it was marketing manly products, or it was something along those lines. I can't remember right now, but he was known in the Twin Cities as the person, if you wanted to market man deodorant or tools or something really, really manly, he was the person that you went to because his expertise was marketing to men, right? And that became his tagline. That's how he intentionally created the perception that others would have of him. Okay, so on the flip side of that, if you haven't created your intentional brand, you have people who have a perception of you, right? They already have an idea of what you do, who you are. It could be skill-based, like, man, that is the best developer that I always want to work with, or that person's an awesome product manager or boss or whatever it is, right? Or it could be personality based, right? And so there's this really yucky story in the personal branding course when I was in high school, I worked, I was like, I don't know what they're called, but like elves for Santa. So I was at the little photo booth in the mall, and the boss, she, she had a really, really bad body odor or breath. I can't remember which, but no matter how good she was at her job or not good at her job, none of us cared about that. All we knew was stay like 3 feet away from her, or else you'll start gagging, right? And so her brand had a lot more to do with not her proficiency at work, but more of something that had to do with her character. And it was really unfortunate, but that's the way it was. That's what her brand was. So bottom line, you have a brand that's either intentional that you've created, or it's unintentional and it just happens. And what I want you to do, everybody who's watching this, is I want you to think about what your brand is. So I was speaking at Pepperdine a number of years ago, to their MBA program, and the person before me, I went in early to watch the other speakers, and the person right before me, and luckily we had lunch after, between theirs and mine, she did my whole presentation. Like everything that I was going to talk about with networking and branding and careers and everything I was doing, she did the whole thing. And I'm sitting there taking notes, and I'm like, I have nothing to say. Like, she said everything, right? So anyway, so so we had lunch, and then another speaker spoke, and then I had that horrible 2 o'clock slot where everybody's like starting to fall asleep, and their sugar rush from lunch was going down and stuff like that. And I started talking about, branding and branding and branding. And this one kid raises his hand and he says, I still don't get it. Like, that person talked about personal branding. You've been talking about personal branding. I just don't understand what a personal brand is. And I said, I'd never thought of this before. It just was like inspiration that came in the moment, thank goodness. And I said, your brand, write this down, your brand is how others perceive you. It's not even necessarily what you say. It's probably not what a lot of people think their brand is, right? The brand is how others perceive you. I worked on a project, one of my first really big development projects 100 years ago was on developing a web-based 360 review system where a manager could take one of their team members and push out an anonymous survey that was answered by, in kind of 360. So was answered by bosses and subordinates and peers, and then like partners or vendors or, people outside of the department. And the whole idea was that you would have people with different perspectives, right? Because a boss might say something different about you and your work than what a subordinate or a peer might say. And so the 360 review was a great way to get a pretty good bird's eye view of how other people perceived you. And I think there are some 360 tools. I know there have been, I don't know if they're still around. But what you really could do, you have to have thick skin and you have to be super honest. Okay. You have to tell people like, look, I really want to know how you would describe me or what you think about me. And it could be anything. And maybe set up some context like, hey, I'm looking at some career changes and I just really want to understand what my value is in the market or my value in a team. And I would love some feedback about who I am from your perspective. And I just want you to know that what you tell me, I'm not going to like harbor ill feelings. Like, I'm not going to be mad at you if you tell me the truth. How many times do we get mad when all we receive is positive feedback? And we really just wish that we got some real feedback that would help us focus on some kind of improvement, right? And so think about doing something like that where you ask people like, hey, as my boss, can you just give me like some good characteristics or good feedback and then some things that I can work on? And ask different types of, like the 360, ask different types of people for that feedback. And that should help you understand how others perceive you. Because like I said, your brand isn't necessarily what you want it to be or what you say it is in your tagline. Your brand could simply be what everybody is saying about you, and you might not know what they're saying about you. So I have some other stories on the perception in the personal branding course, but I don't want to belabor the point. Okay, so let's go into some tactics, because I really like the idea of having tactical things that you can do and work on. So one of the basic things you can do is go Google your name, and you might need to do it in an incognito window, so it's not like the search results aren't based on what you've been searching for or clicking through and biased on that. So go into maybe an incognito window, do a search result on your name. If you have a too common of a name, then maybe what you need to do is like put some qualifiers, like, I might put in Jason Alba, Utah, or Jason Alba, company name or title or something like that, and see what comes up. When I first started this big journey back in 2006, and my book came out in 2008, Jason Alba, the author, came up in 2008. But the problem is that author wrote a book on accounting, and that's definitely not me. Like I for a minute thought maybe accounting would be fun. I don't know if it would have been fun, but a rewarding career choice. And so anyways, I was like, all right, if people are looking up Jason Alba, they're finding this guy who wrote a book on accounting, and couldn't be further from me. So look that up. One of the easiest things to have show up high in the search results for you is your LinkedIn profile. And most LinkedIn profiles I see are really quite weak. Like, there's a lot of room for improvement. I used to charge $100 to do a profile critique. I'd spend an hour with you on the phone, and I'd record it, a webinar, and I do this critique from top to bottom of your profile and give you all these ideas of what to do. And honestly, everything that I talk about is in my LinkedIn profile course on LinkedIn, but people just wanted me to say, okay, I saw your course, but can you just, do this critique with me? And as I go through it, I'm like, I talked about all of these things. So at no cost to you, you can go check out that LinkedIn profile course, take notes on it of stuff you want to update on your own profile. But really, most everything that I would advise you to do is in that course. All right. So what I would want you to do at a minimum is create your about, which is kind of your bio. And we'll talk more about LinkedIn and your LinkedIn profile next week at one of these 10 o'clock things. But I want you to do your picture. I want you to do a professional tagline, which is that thing that shows up. They used to call it professional headline. It shows up right under your picture. And then the about section, which really becomes your bio. At a minimum, that's what you should be doing on LinkedIn. Next week, when we talk about LinkedIn, we'll talk about things that you can do to show up higher in the search results, and things that you can do to flesh out your LinkedIn profile for search, but also for the human reader, right? And for your brand. All right, so that's the basic stuff. Just go spend a little bit of time. It doesn't really need to be that much, but spend a little bit of time on LinkedIn. The next level of personal branding stuff you can do, I used to talk a lot about blogging, because back in 2006, when I first started Jibber Jobber, I blogged a lot, and blogging was an amazing branding and networking tool. The thing I found is that as much as I like to talk about it, people are nervous to commit to a long-term blog. It's like they're getting into a relationship, and you kind of are, right? And what if nobody ever reads my blog and stuff like that? So I have some ideas and some thoughts about that, but I don't push blogging anymore. I still think it's one of the best things you can do. And if you ever want to talk about it, I'll talk about it for hours, because I've been blogging a lot since 2006. Still a big fan of it, but I know that a lot of people are like, well, I don't know how to set one up, and I don't know where to go and what to write about. And then next thing you know, they have something, they wrote 2 or 3 blog posts, and then they haven't written for a year, and then they're mad at me because I suggested it. So an alternative to that would be to go into LinkedIn and write a LinkedIn article. Just write a LinkedIn article. It's like a blog post, really, but there's no commitment. It's not like you should write one a month or one a week or 3 a week or anything like that. Just go write one article, okay? So here's the strategy behind this. What you do is you figure out what your brand should be, okay? So I am an expert in this, or think about a job title that you want to have. And I want to have I want to be known. I want to be perceived as a thought leader or subject matter expert in this topic. And then you write an article about it. Okay. And so the easy thing to do would be like, let's see, we're kind of at the beginning of 2020. So you might say something like, um, five things that every front end developer needs to know in 2020. Well, I mean, if I was a front end developer, I would at least skim through the list of your five things. And if I agreed with them and the logic that you put under each of those five things, then I would be like, oh yeah, this person actually, like there's some subject matter expertise here. And if I saw an article like that coming out regularly, then I would start to, five things that every front end developer needs to know about SQL. Five things that every front end developer needs to know about working with UX or working with a product manager or working with a customer. You see what I'm doing here? Like your expertise is front end developer, for example, right? And as you write articles about these things, you're creating this body of knowledge that you're sharing, showing your passion and your interest, and you're starting to form how others should perceive you. And others might have perceived you differently 10 or 20 years ago from the early parts of your career, even maybe before you had a career change, right? But now you're shaping and shifting how you want others to perceive you. Okay, so another thing that you can do, I would do the article thing first. Honestly, I'm not going to tell you to do a blog, because even though I think it's an awesome my first choice. It's definitely my first choice. The LinkedIn articles, it's there today. Right now, you can go write your article and post it and be done today. And if you want to do another one next week, then do another one next week. If you want to do one in 3 months, then do one in 3 months. Like, it's just there and it's easy. After you get a little bit of practice, right? And you've done this and you're feeling like you found a groove and you figured out how you message and how you write. I used to buy like the physical things that came to our house. Go find some industry newsletters or industry, I'm just going to call them magazines, but find some industry magazines that you can pitch and say, hey, I've been writing here for a while, and I'd love to write this article for you guys. I read you guys, and you have to come across not as a PR person and not as somebody. I mean, I get pitches like that probably 1 to 3 times a day, and I can kind of sniff them out, and I don't even read them. I just delete. But if you can write something where somebody else has already created an audience and they market to that audience, right? Even if, once again, nobody reads it, at least you can say, oh yeah, I write LinkedIn articles and stuff, and I've also been published in this place and this place and this place, right? Speaking of published in, another question I have in my job search clubs when I talk about personal branding is, who here wants to write a book? Raise your hand if you want to write a book. And I'll get like 2 or 3 people that want to write a book and nobody else does. And I say, okay, look, I tell them the story about my book when I wrote my LinkedIn book, and it's the thing that kept me on the map and it kept me relevant. And it kept my company, Jibber Jobber, up and running. And it got me on the speaking circuit, which got more visibility for my company. And it was just such a phenomenal experience. Like I said, it wasn't even a good book, even though the title was good. So I say, look, I am a huge advocate of using books as a personal branding tool. But, probably you're not going to go out and, look for a publisher and all that stuff. So I want to teach you how to write a book. For all the people who don't want to write a book, okay, this is the group of nope, not doing it. And I basically talk about how to write an ebook. And I say, okay, write in their pencil to their paper, and they're getting ready to take notes, and they think it's going to be really insightful. And I say, open up Word. And there's this uncomfortable pause, and then people start chuckling, and then everybody starts laughing. And my whole point is, like, there's not a whole lot of sophistication in writing your book, right? Like, some of you have written emails long enough to be a book. There's definitely some tactics on what you can do, like create your table of contents and shoot for a number of words and, figure out that stuff. But really what I want you to do is just start writing something. If your book is 5 pages long, because it's just an ebook, so that's okay. If it's 12 pages long, it's okay. If it's 20 pages long, it's okay. If it's 100 or 200 pages, I would say, it might be a branding tool that you've put way too much work into. Maybe you should do 5 ebooks, right? But imagine if you're talking to a prospect or a hiring manager or somebody, and you're talking about a certain topic that you wrote an ebook on, and you say, I actually wrote a book on this topic. Can I send it to you? Wouldn't that differentiate you so much more than any of the other job seekers or any of the other people bidding on the contract? Like, what an awesome thing for them to sit down across from the person who wrote a book on that topic, right? And I think the message that I want to give is that this is not some huge project that you're going to spend the next 4 months or year on. This is something that you could probably sit down and with some discipline and crank out in a few weeks, maybe a couple of months. All right, another tactical thing that you can do for your brand, and I know this might make some of you nervous, is to figure out some speaking opportunities. And they can be small, they can be at local meetups, or they can be at national or international conferences. Before I started speaking, I had zero intention of speaking. And it's kind of a funny story, but I didn't want to speak at all. I didn't have anything to say. I didn't think anybody would listen to me. I didn't think it would be worth my time. And I found that all 3 of those were actually wrong. But the interesting thing is that when you get on stage, people in the audience think that you have gone through some kind of process, a vetting process. Like, the conference organizer, for some reason, was confident in you or your message or whatever, right? And so immediately when you get on stage, you're starting off good. You're starting off from a good place. You have to not mess that up. I've seen speakers get up and they're too pitchy, or they're too, I don't know, their message just isn't coherent. They don't have enough meat, I actually was listening to somebody who has sold millions of dollars of a program, and I went in and started listening to some of their stuff, and I thought, there is no way that I'm going any further, because this is just rambling on and I'm not taking any actionable things, right? And so I'm not going to tell you that speaking is really easy. All you have to do is make some phone calls or send some emails, and then you get on stage and everything's wonderful. Now you have your personal brand. What I will tell you is that speaking is an awesome personal branding tactic, and it can really help you set yourself apart as I said this earlier, but I didn't really pop them out, subject matter experts or a thought leader. These are the 2 things that I really want to, I want my brand to go towards. I want people to know me as a subject matter expert or, because it could be and or a thought leader. Okay. And so when you have some articles up, and when you've written for industry magazines, and when you can say that you've spoken at these meetups, especially if you go out of state or somewhere else, because there's this whole idea that if you speak not in your local area, then maybe that person really is an expert, right? There is actually a course on Pluralsight by John Papa, and I didn't write down the title of the course, sorry. But if you look up in John's courses, there's one on public speaking. And John does a lot of speaking, and he's very popular Pluralsight author. So that's definitely a course that I would recommend. All right, let's jump over to, because we are 40 minutes in. Let's jump over to a few more things, and then we'll wrap it up. A few more concepts. So in my course on Pluralsight on personal branding, I talk about bad words. I say, it was kind of funny because I was listening to it today, and I haven't listened to my own stuff for a long time. And it said something like, don't use bad words in your personal branding. And I thought, wait, what the heck? Well, when I go into the concept of bad words, I say, of course, don't use filthy words. Like, don't use cuss words. Duh. Like, hopefully nobody's gonna do that. But what I say is, don't use these two types of bad words. One is jargon and one is cliche. Now, if you're talking to peers and colleagues who get your jargon, fine, okay? But if you're not talking to peers and colleagues who don't understand your jargon, what you're doing is you're making it hard for those people to talk well or write correctly about you. Okay, so if you go to someone and say, "Yeah, this is what I do. You know, this is my day job," and you give them like title or something very jargony, and they're like, "Oh, you work with computers," and you're like, "Yeah, but there's like 20 different areas of computer expertise, and this is my expertise, and it's so awesome." And they're like, "Does not compute. I don't know what any of that is." So he's the computer guy. That's the geek, right? And so when you use jargon, you confuse people and you make it harder for them to be your evangelist. Okay. The other one is cliche. And I see this a lot in like little cute taglines, where like under your name and your email signature, when you use these little taglines and you put cliche in, and it, you people read that and they're like, I don't know what that means. Like, I mean, I know what it means, but I don't know how it applies to Jason. I don't know how this makes Jason, this doesn't say anything about him, right? And so I think that when you use cliche, you lose meaning in the words that you put up. You water down the power of what you're trying to say. Okay, let me just see, we're getting close to the top. Let me jump over real quick to look at my messages on Twitter. Okay, no questions on Twitter. I'm going to give one more concept and then we'll close out with some takeaways, like some actionables, to-dos, and then we'll be wrapped up. So years ago, when I had just started Jibber Jabbers, before I wrote my first book on LinkedIn, and I was at a conference in Chicago for bloggers, and it was really a lot of fun. And this guy named Andy Cernovitz gets up on stage, and he is the founder of the Word of Mouth Marketing Association, and just really fascinating. And he had 5 things to do to get word of mouth. And he's like, all right, well, do this and do this and do this. And I'm furiously writing things down because I wanted word of mouth for Jibber Jabber, right? I was at the beginning stages of my company, and I wanted to figure out how to market it better. And I was just so excited about all these ideas. And then he said something that was so intriguing at the very end. He said, and if none of these work for you, and I was like, what a consultant. Like, that's how consultants are. They come in, they give you their ideas, and then it's like they leave a little room for, and this might not work for you because you don't do it the right way. But anyways, Andy says, and if none of these work for you, latch on to a brand or a product or a company or a person that is getting word of mouth marketing. Latch on to something that is getting the buzz, right? And so at the time, nobody knew what Jibber Jabber was, but everybody knew what LinkedIn was. Everybody was talking about it. It was growing super fast. Everybody knew that you had to be on it. Nobody knew what to do with it. Nobody knew why they needed to be on it, but it was kind of a fear of missing out or something. I don't know, but they were everybody knew to be on LinkedIn. And I actually had a contract with my publisher to write a book on LinkedIn that I was dragging my feet. And I was thinking, everybody says you don't make money with a book, and it's going to take a ton of time, and it's taking time away from what I'm doing with Jibber Jabber. And I walked out of that thing probably before Andy sat down. I was so excited. I walked out, called my publisher, and I said, I will have a manuscript to you in 2 weeks. I need it for a conference that I'm going to in September. What can we do? Is this possible? And he was like, nope, nobody's ever written a book that fast in our process, blah, blah, blah. Long story short, I had him a manuscript. He got me my books in time for the conference, and it was awesome. The message is, what is a brand that is already getting a lot of traction that you can grab onto? Right. And it might be the name of a language that you program in. It might be, remember back in the olden days, everybody talked about Six Sigma and lean and stuff like that. Like, Those were brands that already had a lot of power and clout, and people would lead with, I'm a black belt in Six Sigma, or a green belt or whatever. People would lead with something else's brand, and it enhanced their own brand. So my question to you is, what is that company or product or whatever that you could borrow the clout and the power of their brand and attach to your brand to kind of propel your brand? The only reason why I'm here today, instead of working in some corporate job that, nothing against corporate jobs, but the reason why I'm on the career path that I'm on is because I wrote a book that was attached to LinkedIn. And I've said it 5 times already. The book was no good, but the title was great and the topic was so timely, right? All right, so let's wrap this up. I was thinking maybe I could do 20 minutes today, but of course I am too wordy. So takeaways: go and watch the Killer Personal Branding course on Pluralsight. Just search for Pluralsight branding or personal branding or whatever. That's just really for today. So if you don't have time to do that, that's fine. Tomorrow, we're going to talk about informational interviews, and I'm super excited about it. It really is one of my most favorite topics. I want you to go out to LinkedIn or Twitter or wherever you have profiles online that you should do some branding, and go update your stuff. Not everything. We'll talk about LinkedIn next week and we'll go really in depth, but at least think about your bio and your tagline, which will be part of your brand, and your picture. Create your tagline, and I have some the how to create your tagline in the personal branding course. And then I want you to think about doing an ebook. I really would love for you to think about writing an ebook. I know some of you are like, I don't have time. Well, you're quarantined, so maybe you do have time right now. I'm just kidding. No, make the time. Like, here's one of the best pieces of advice that I got from Tom Singer, who has written multiple books, and he's a professional speaker out of Austin, Texas. He said that his advice is, once you get your outline, which becomes your table of contents, what I want you to do is take 20 or 30 minutes every morning for 90 days and write for 20 or 30 minutes. That's it. Every morning or night or whenever your brain is working. For 90 days, writing 20 or 30 minutes a morning, and you'll have your book. You'll have your first draft. And that's for a real book. That's like a big book. I bet if you did 20 or 30 minutes, you can have your ebook in 2 to 3 weeks. If you have any ideas or questions on this, just hit me up on Twitter, direct message or whatever. All right. When you go to any of the courses on Pluralsight, click on the related courses tab, specifically on the personal branding. The 2 that I wanted to bring up is one from John Papa on public speaking, which I talked about. And the other one was from Heather Ackman on PowerPoints. Just a great tool for if you want to do speaking and presentations and stuff like that. Not because I want to make you a speaker, but because I want you to use speaking as a personal branding tool, okay? So here's the last 2 questions that I want you to think about. How do you want to be known? How do you want others to perceive you? Okay, write that down. Seriously, I'd love for you to write that down, because that becomes your goal. That becomes your objective. And then I want you to back into the objective by thinking about what you can do to influence how others perceive you, right? And all the stuff I talked about today and the stuff that's over on that Pluralsight course, because there's a whole lot more tactical stuff in the course, but your LinkedIn profile, your email signature, which we didn't really have time to go into, the idea of articles and speaking and all these other things. That's how you influence people to perceive you the way you want to be perceived. Okay, so let me just go through these chats here real quick. Jose says, thank you and you're welcome. And tomorrow on informational interviews, it's going to be really cool. So go watch the informational interview course today or tomorrow before 10 o'clock. And then that'll jumpstart you on the conversation. Trevor says, this was good. Are you limited to only publishing courses for Pluralsight? Do you publish courses anywhere else? So this is kind of my little secret. Am I limited? No, I can do courses elsewhere. I have no interest in doing courses elsewhere. I actually did 9 courses on Jibber not about Jibber but in the Jibber platform for job seekers before I started with Pluralsight. But I have no interest in doing courses anywhere else, and I'm betting on Pluralsight, and so far it's been a good bet. So I appreciate that. I don't understand the context of your question, so if you have more questions about authoring and creating courses elsewhere, hit me up. I love to talk about this stuff. So anyways, that's it, guys. If you're on Twitter, please go and share my tweets about this. We'll do the next one in about 23 hours on informational interviews. That's it. Thank you.